Hello, I'm Joan Brown. It's my great pleasure to host this segment of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame show. Since 1987, the Hall of Fame has inducted over 140 Marin women of distinction, women who have made immense contributions to the county of Marin and its residents, as well as to the world beyond. Honorees have distinguished themselves in many fields: education, science, business, philanthropy, the arts, politics, law, philosophy, and religion. Each honoree has been a force for positive change in our community. It's a great privilege to acknowledge and document their contributions. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Virginia Green Edwards, who was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2017 for her remarkable work in education. So, Virginia?
Yes.
You grew up in a small town, Lewisburg, North Carolina.
Yes, it's 29 miles from Raleigh, North Carolina, which is the capital of North Carolina.
So when you grew up there, it was the height of segregation. Please tell us about your family and what messages they gave to their children.
Well, if I had any place to choose, North Carolina would have been a place where I was, because North Carolina, although we had restrictions placed on us, there were a lot of universities around, and so there were people who thought beyond being segregationists, and so we really didn't feel it too much, except when we went downtown to shop, or when we had the drinking fountains and they had color etched on one side and white on the other side. But we had a rich environment because we were self-contained. We had our own churches, we had businesses. Our parents taught us that the sky was the limit, that we could do whatever we wanted to do, and no one told us we were poor. And so we pulled together and we worked. There was no financial aid. There was no welfare. Even older people, nobody retired. They just worked until they got so sick they had to stop working. So I think all of these things, growing up in a situation like that, made you a stronger person because you knew that you could achieve. And although our schools were segregated, and although they would send the books to us that had been used and with no pages in it, we took lemons and made lemonade out of that. We had our way of doing things, and some of the things that it was so silly was that you could go into someone's house, which is a personal thing, take care of their children, cook their food, but you couldn't eat out of certain plates. Yeah. They had special utensils to use, and so we laughed at a lot of the stuff. And then they would sit and you would be there serving them, and they would talk about all kinds of things, personal things, as if you weren't there. So you learned more about them than they learned about you.
So tell me about your mother. She was a remarkable woman.
Yes, she was. My mother's mother died when she was about 10 or 11 years old.
This is your mother's mother?
My mother's mother. And they were farmers. And before her mother died, her father had gone to Virginia to work to make a better life for them. But somehow they got disconnected. And so when her mother died, she was passed from pillar to post to relatives of his. And he would send money for them to take care of the children, but they would take the money and use it for their personal needs, and they would destroy the letters, so they lost contact with their father. And I found him through Ancestry.com. He had gone from one part of Virginia down to Norfolk, and he did quite well. But my mother didn't have it easy. She left those situations. She came into town when she was about 17, 18 years old. And the first person that she worked for was a very mean woman, and she hit my mother in the head with a water pitcher. And my mother, until she died, had that scar in her head. So she left there, and then she was able to find work with people who were very nice. And then after she did that, she was a maid. She made $10 a week. My father made $31 a week, and they did.
And your dad worked in restaurants?
In a restaurant. And my mother would work. She fixed food for us and get the house straight, and she would leave and she would go to the house and duplicate what she had done at her own home. And in the afternoons when she got off from being a maid, during the season when there was cotton and tobacco, she would go up and walk to the edge of the town, and she would pick 100 pounds of cotton after she'd worked.
After she'd done a full day's work?
After she'd done a full day's work. And then when the tobacco season came in, the railroad tracks ran right through our neighborhood, so she would go to the packing houses and she would help pack the tobacco to be shipped by train out of Lewisburg. And then another thing she did, she would pick up scrap iron. There was a trash pile in our neighborhood that they burned the trash. They bring trash there, and she would go there and she would collect iron and all kinds of metal. And by the end of the month, she had a truck full, and her friend would take her to Henderson, North Carolina, which was about 19 miles from Lewisburg, and she would sell that, and she'd make more money there than she made in 2 or 3 months working. But my mother was a hard worker. She was a very intelligent woman, and she believed in education. She would tell us when we were little children, you're going to somebody's school, and she wasn't talking about elementary or high school. She was talking about college.
So you've dedicated yourself to teaching, and speaking of college, you earned a BA from Virginia Union University,
Yes.
which is a historically black college. And then you got your master's degree
From Dominican University
from
here.
Dominican, and then you ultimately got your doctorate of education from USF.
Yes.
You've had over 40 years teaching, and
I taught in Richmond, Virginia. I taught there for 5.5 years. And then I came out to Seattle when my husband came to school. Wasn't planning to be there. I was supposed to stay there and work, and he was coming home in the summer. But I taught in Seattle for 1.5 years, and then I came down here. And the first interview, I didn't know where anybody lived, but the first interview I got was in Sausalito, and they hired me. But I always worked in large school districts, so it was an adjustment for me to work in a small school district because everything is instant.
right.
When people had problems, they went right to the superintendent of the small.
Yeah.
But with Richmond, Virginia, and Seattle, the superintendent, you didn't see him except for the beginning of school, so he handled problems. But it was hard working in a small school district.
But you did more than teach.
Yes, I had really 2 jobs. Starting in 1971, I became director of state and federal projects, Chapter 1, which was for disadvantaged children. I don't like to say that word. Alcohol, drug, and tobacco. I had a whole umbrella of things that fell into that category. And I actually did 2 jobs until I got my doctorate, and then they took me out of the classroom, but I still had contact with the children.
So why did you pursue teaching as a career, and what has education meant to you and the students you taught?
Teaching was one of the only things that we could be independent in the South. You could be a teacher. I wanted to go into business, but I had to be realistic. The only place that I could have gotten a job in business was in an insurance company, and not doing very much but being a secretary there. So I assessed, and I felt that in education there were always jobs. And I liked children. So it was good that I liked children because so many people went into education, but they didn't like it and they hated it, but they had nowhere else to go. But to me, teaching is the most important thing that a teacher, because if they don't get it at home, if they have a sympathetic teacher, then they're going to get it when they come to school. And that's the thing that I liked about teaching. We had a lot of children who did not get the nurturing that they needed. Not that their parents their parents didn't have the skills to do that. And when people say, oh, these parents don't do their job, but we need to start when a parent decides they're going to have a child, and we need to start some type of education with that parent. Because when people have children now, they can talk to the children. Some people read books. And so they start off working with their children. But so many homes, there were no books. I would buy books for children. I'd come to, here, when I moved here, I would come to the Salvation Army and Goodwill. And so I had a sufficient library in my classroom. So if the children took the books and didn't bring them back, it didn't matter. I wanted them to take them. But I think that, to me, the most important person in your child's life, except for their parents, is that teacher. And that's why I don't understand why people have such low regard and pay such little money for a person who has the most precious thing in your life is your child. And so this is why I don't watch too many sports, because I say the football and basketball and hockey players make more in one night than we made as teachers.
As a whole career. So in college, you volunteered with a civil rights organization called Crusade for Voters. And it was the mission of this group to help people of color vote when there were clear discrimination barriers for voting. Please tell us about the blank paper registration, and how this whole experience impacted you and what you learned about yourself through this experience.
Well, when I was at Virginia Union University, the legislators there had passed this law that they would give you a blank piece of paper, and you had to remember what they wanted you to list on there, and you had to pay poll taxes too. The blank piece of paper, you had to remember where you put the name, your address, and all those kinds of things. If you missed one of those things, they wouldn't let you vote. So what we would do on Saturdays, we would go out into the Church Hill community, and people know Church Hill by Patrick Henry's address, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death. Well, at that time, that gentrification hadn't taken place. The blacks had moved into that area because whites moved up to the West End because of the coal, and it was such a dirty place to live. But anyway, we would go over there, and we would teach people how to vote, what they needed to learn to vote. And we were very successful. We were so successful that this white lady went in front of the legislators and said, you know what, you're doing us harm. She said, the black people come and they know what to put on the paper and they can vote. She said, poor white folks don't know. Nobody's doing anything for them. So it was, it backfired, like a lot of other things that they did that didn't make sense.
So when we were talking about this before, you said that this was a very empowering experience for you as a young woman because you realized how much one person could do.
Yes.
To make a difference.
I still have that philosophy. It's like you need to go out. People are not very philanthropic, and a lot of times you don't get paid for the things that are necessary for you to do. And I think that all of us hold responsibility when we elect people that we really don't want because we didn't do our response. We didn't go out and solicit and help tell people and educate people. Education in all areas is needed.
So as a teacher, you were a mentor and a role model. What values and lessons did you try to pass on to your children?
First, I tried to tell them that, look, especially in Marin, I have not always lived. I live in Marinwood. I've lived there ever since I've been here. I said, I've not always lived in a neighborhood like Marinwood. The kind of car, because I didn't like to have cars every 3 years. I bought cars that would transcend over time. So they would admire my car. I said, all you need to do is stay in school and get an education, and then you can have what I have. But I never said, oh no, I didn't experience it, because if you notice at my speech at the Hall of Fame, I tried to educate people, because I think a lot of people needed to hear what I said, because all people think that, oh, we are all on welfare, we all get financial aid, which isn't true. I started working when I was 13 years old, working in someone's house, helping them after school, taking their kids out in the afternoon, going out into the tobacco fields. And I used to go out into the tobacco fields and pull worms off the tobacco.
Wow.
And so the first job I had, my mother took me to the bank, and she told me, well, you're not going to spend all that money. and I'm counting in my head what I was making. So she got me to open up a savings account, and I have had a savings account ever since.
Good for you. So you retired quite a while ago in 1999, but that has not meant that you've stopped giving and going, and you've been incredibly active. You've worked in the expungement program in the district attorney's and public defender's office. You've been on the board of Performing Stars for more than 20 years. In 2015, you were given the Champion Award by Salvation Army because now you've given more than 6,500 hours and so many more things. So please share with us about commitment to community and the role community has played in your life.
Well, when I grew up, as I said, it was a small town, and everybody knew each other, and you had a lot of relatives, and you did for people. My mother, when I was in college, and what she was doing, there was this thing in North Carolina. If young mothers got pregnant without a husband, and they'd had a few children, the welfare people would tell them, if you have any more children, we're going to cut you off. And they also would give abortions, make people have abortions. So this lady had another child, and my mother and her friend fed this woman the whole winter.
Wow.
She and her children. So I feel that those of us who have should reach back and help people. not only with those kinds of things, but in encouraging them. And I try to encourage young women especially. I encourage young men too, but I tell young women, get educated, because men respect you more when you're educated and you don't have to depend on asking them for things. And I also tell them that then your family will have a better life. Mm-hmm. And at the time that I got married in 1958, it took 2 salaries, even though you were educated, to make it, because we didn't make as much money as our counterparts. Mm-hmm. And I think that white women have learned a lot about working, because some of their husbands didn't want them to work. Mm-hmm. And what happens is they would put them on a pedestal. Well, it's better to bring in money so your children can have more, you can have a better house. And with the civil rights movement and civil rights, we pull a lot of people into jobs and wanting to have opportunities to do things, because we sat in, we laid in, we rode the buses. My cousins went on those bus rides to Mississippi. So we did a lot of things, and I think a lot of young people don't know about that.
Well, and maybe it's changing. So you've told me, I know who I am. I don't do anything for any awards. I just do things from my soul, from my heart. So that being said, in 2008, you were awarded the Martin Luther King Humanitarian Award by the Human Rights Commission. And of all the honors you've received, and you've received innumerable, please tell us why this one is dearest to your heart.
Because it was something that money couldn't buy, I couldn't buy, but it was me giving service to people, all kinds of people. And with the food program that I do 2 food programs. I work with Respecting Your Elders too. I run the program up at the Trinity Church. But what I think about that is that's something that's from my heart. Mm-hmm. I could, since I'm retired, I could go on vacations all the time, or I could stay at home and sleep late. But if I can help, there's a song, if I can help somebody along the way, then my living will not be in vain. I just feel that a lot of us need to do what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Because people complain about people, but you do a lot of things when you volunteer, because a lot of the old senior citizens that I come in contact with, I encourage them. I encourage young people who come, like today we had food program. They enjoy me because they say that I'm a nice lady.
Well, I can concur with that.
But I'm just saying that a lot of us don't do it. We're selfish with our time. Uh-huh. Time is spent on the traveling a lot, on golf course, things that they could do that does not cost the money. It doesn't cost any money for you to volunteer, but out of the goodness of your heart. But you have to have that in you, and I got that from my parents. Uh-huh.
And I know that you've instilled that in your students too. What pearls of wisdom or pet peeves do you want to share with us?
The pet peeves, I want people to stop telling their children they're poor. Mm-hmm. I never heard anybody tell me I was poor. Mm-hmm. You might not, like out in this county, I was saying that to someone. They said, well, in this county, I said, I used to tell my kids when they went to Turlin High School, I don't have a business for you to fade into. I don't have a car that you can take to Turlin High School and sit there. But when it's time for you to have those things, you'll have it. But I think people they can get, in this county, especially if they have a little money, they tell their kids, oh, you're poor. You're not poor. As long as you have a brain and you can think and improve yourself, you're not poor. As long as you're able to get up and breathe and move around, you're not poor. Another pet peeve I have is I want people to stop labeling special kids, special need kids. Yeah. Because when I was in school, I'm sure that there were some kids in my classroom who were special needs, but we helped them. And so one of them became a nurse. So I'm just saying, late bloomers, we need to stop labeling people.
In your opinion, what would you say are the 3 top community needs in Marin in this year of 2017? I think
housing.
Housing, yeah.
Because more young people, even though their parents they're coming back home to stay. I had a friend who had an $1,800 voucher. She could not get a place in Marin to live. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, because we have other people who are here now, she said, I could always go in the canal and get a place. She said, now I can't find anything. Mm-hmm. So I think she finally moved out of the county. Another pet peeve I have is people making assumptions about you. Mm-hmm. People will see me, and they don't do it now, but they used to come to my house and ring my doorbell and ask to speak to the lady of the house. And so I told my husband, this was some time ago, but they still look at me now when they come and see me there. But I told my husband, the next time someone comes and asks me to speak to the lady of the house, I'm going to have some nice words for them. And so this lady came, really nice, and I speak to the lady of the house, and excuse me, but I told her, this is my damn house, now what do you want? But I'm just saying, people make assumptions. They make assumptions about where you live. The first thing they say to me, oh, do you live in Marin City? No, I don't live in Marin City, but I have plenty of friends that live in Marin City. So it happens when I came to this county, I didn't know where anyone lived. We were coming from the University of Washington. My husband had friends up there, and they knew Marinwood. They knew good schools, and they told him, don't, if you're not going to the city, because I did not want to live in the city, go to Marinwood. So that's where we went. But I think people need to stop making assumptions. Because when you go to a seminar and people write the word assume on the chalkboard, you know what it is.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I don't need, so a lot of us know what it is. But just stop making assumptions about people.
What advice do you have for girls and women in Marin County about being fully engaged in the community and supporting the community and each other?
I think that has to be taught from home. I think they need to feel that they are empowered. They don't need to have a fellow to make them, to fulfill them, to make them feel whole. They need to know that when you're independent, even if you get married and then they come home and tell you that they've outgrown you, you can get out and get a job.
And you've been married, what, 52 years?
59 years.
59 years.
59 years. And some 13 or 14 of those years, we maintained 2 households because my husband was teaching at the University of California, Santa Barbara. So I kept the home here because the teenagers were going to high school, and we had an apartment in Santa Barbara. And that's how we spent our time, and he'd come home every other weekend. And it's hard, but we did it.
And because you were an independent woman,
yes,
you were able to manage that, and you cooperatively worked on that to keep a marriage intact for that number of years. It's quite admirable.
Well, thank you for that. But there again, my parents had been married a long time. His parents had been married a long time. So you have to learn.
So, Virginia, if somebody isn't getting that at home, where can they get it? Where can they get that sense of community and of giving back and making the world better than where you find it?
I think that our schools are not like they used to be, because if children didn't get that at home, there was somebody on that faculty who nurtured. It's just like me. I've had a mini child's hair fixed for graduation. I've bought books. I've bought all kinds of things for kids. But it has to come from in here. And a lot of people, it's just a job. They don't see doing anything. I go there to teach with a lot of the younger people now.
So I'm thinking that Performing Stars, which
yes,
gives that to kids.
Yes, we do.
And that there are, if they don't have it at home, there are people like you who are role models, people who have programs where kids have role models and have opportunities to grow and get confidence. And I think you can't give what you ain't got.
True.
And if you feel good about yourself, you can give back to community. And
if you're not afraid to open up who you are.
Yeah.
Some people hide, I've had friends who came from similar backgrounds, and when they moved to the city, they lived in the city the biggest city next to the city.
Yeah.
But they grew up in a small town, but they would say, I live in Raleigh, but you lived in Lewisburg. A lot of people still have that. They put on this facade, I've always had, well, we always had. And I can't ever say that we went without any food or clothing or housing, because my mother shopped early bird sales. So we had clothing from one season. At the end of the season, she would buy those clothes. And then wintertime, she'd buy winter clothes, and we had it for the next winter. But I think that you have to be nurtured into being that kind of a person. And I said there's a gene in my whole family. We always helping people. My cousins, we're always doing that, helping people.
Well, Virginia, yours has been an amazing journey. I'm so impressed that the daughter of a woman who picked cotton after a full day's work and who worked in the tobacco factory inspired her daughter to become Dr. Virginia Edwards.
And my brother was also college educated.
And your brother, and you in turn have inspired countless others to also go and reach your dreams. So thank you so much for sharing.
Can I say one
Sure.
thing? Don't hang out with zeros. Tell the young people, because zeros aren't going anywhere. This is for, especially for young women. Don't hang out with zeros. They're not going to change. Don't let anyone pull you down.
And you have lifted so many up. Thank you for sharing your stories. So Virginia, yours is really an amazing journey. And I am so impressed that your mom, who picked cotton and worked in a tobacco factory after working a full-time job, inspired her daughter to become Dr. Virginia Edwards, and that you in turn have inspired literally countless others to reach their dreams and to know that the sky is the limit and become the best person that they can be. And we thank you so much for sharing your stories from your incredible life. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. The Marin Women's Hall of Fame is a project of the YWCA of San Francisco and Marin. If you would like to learn more about the Hall of Fame and our honorees, please visit www.mwhf.org.